Wherever you live in the world, particularly here in the United States, but everywhere really, it's clear that winds of profound change are here. And all the teachings and the practices that I have been giving you thus far in this Sangha series on nurturing spiritual resilience, and the series before that on interconnectedness, the retreats on the heart of awakening, so many things, have really been a preparation for this moment. The possibility of meeting all that we are here with, both in our personal process, interpersonally, and also collectively, with as much grace and wisdom as we possibly can. Whenever there are intense changes in our environment, collectively or in our personal sphere, it's inevitable that that's going to provoke a lot of feelings. We may have all sorts of feelings here in our Sangha about the results of the election. Some of you may be happy about it, but my inbox and my cell phone texts have been flooded by so many messages from friends, students, clients, in shock, in anxiety, in anger, in disbelief, in helplessness, in heartbreak, so many things. And it's important that we don't bypass what is here, what we feel, but somehow practice with it. Somehow be present as we soften, open, and allow our experience with courage, with compassion, with curiosity. Truth is, none of us know what's coming next. But what I do know is that we're going to need community more than ever. Not just like-minded friends, but the palpable refuge that comes when our connection is forged in shared practice. Not just emotional support, but the dedication to turn what we're dealing with into a practice. And that's how our experience gets illuminated. That's not only how our experience becomes more illuminated, it's also how the light of our shared practice starts to infuse other realms, starts to infuse our other relationships, pours more of itself into our world. And that is a significant and very important contribution that people who have the advantage of a spiritual practice can do and need to do. So today I want to go further in our arc of teaching on nurturing spiritual resilience and explore what can help us to stay present and even remain optimistic. I want to open up the regenerative power of joy. So just in considering this subject, what immediately springs into my own heart is the profound embodiment and transmission that I received from one of my earlier spiritual teachers, Rabbi Joseph Gelberman. So I want to share with you a bit about Rabbi and his path, his journey, his embodiment as a way to open up this subject for us today. The context of me sharing this is that Rabbi was a Hungarian Jew from a long lineage of Hasidic rabbis. He was one of 17 brothers and sisters, and he was in his 20s when his country, Hungary, formed an alliance with Nazi Germany in the 30s. Rabbi said about that time when he was in his 20s, he said, we knew it was bad. We knew whatever was happening, we could feel that it was bad, but we had no idea how bad and how fast it was coming down. He had a plan to get all his 17 brothers and sisters, his mother, his father, his grandmother, his grandfather, his wife, his 4-year-old daughter, his whole family out. But in the end, he barely escaped with his own life. He landed in New York with only the clothes on his back, and his Torah, and his yarmulke, and his prayer shawl sewn into the lining of his coat. That was all he had. He never said much about what he went through, how it was for him in those early days of migrating to a country where he barely spoke the language and didn't know anyone in the aftermath of such an immense loss. But he did speak about the friends that he formed and how meaningful it was for him to reach out to other people of faith, not just his own Jewish community. He was a very curious human being, and he formed a very deep friendship with Swami Satchidananda. And you can go on YouTube and see videos of the two of them. In fact, I watched one of those videos last night. It was beautiful. And, you know, for Rabbi, him opening up to other spiritual perspective, and particularly reincarnation that Swami introduced him to, helped him immensely to contextualize his grief with a broader framework. And they went on to become great friends and even gave many retreats together. They were known as the Swami and the Hippie Rabbi. I first met Rabbi G when I was in my 20s. Someone had just handed me a booklet about this seminary that he ran. It was called the New Seminary at the time. And they said to me as they handed me this pamphlet, "You should be an interfaith minister." I was 22. And as they placed that pamphlet in my hand and said that to me, my heart just says, yes, this is true. Although I had no idea what that was or meant. So that is how I met Rabbi. He was the founding father of the whole concept of interfaith seminaries. It did not exist before him. There are many seminaries now, but he's the one that birthed the concept, created this possibility, and he said that he created this as a way to honor the memory of his 4-year-old daughter, that this was like his child, something he could birth into the world that was really about helping people to appreciate and understand one another, to celebrate in diverse spiritual perspectives and practices, to break down unnecessary divisions by sharing. And the motto of that seminary was never instead of, always in addition to. And that was a principle that he lived by and shared with us. The very first words he said to me was a command. "Oh, you'll bring the seminary to England." It wasn't, "Will you?" And I'm saying, "No, you're not hearing me. I want to become a student." "No, good. You'll bring the seminary to England." Which, of course, I did. So we had a very sweet connection. He called me his granddaughter, even though I don't have a Jewish bone in my very waspy body. When Rabbi was in his 80s and I was in my mid-20s, when the year after, a couple of years after I was ordained, and by that time I had students that we were about to ordain, and I brought Rabbi over to meet them, to retreat with us. One afternoon, we were sitting together in the garden of my Oxford home. It was a lovely big garden, a beautiful summer's day. And I knew somehow that this was an amazing opportunity to just ask him more, to go a little deeper. And what I really wanted to know was how he could be so joyful, how he could be, to this day, the most joyful human being I have ever met, when he had been through a degree of loss and directly encountered horrors that are unfathomable to us. And I asked him this question, and he took a deep breath, looked me in the eye, and he said, "I may not always be happy, but my soul's nature is joy. He would say things in a very simple, distilled way that usually only comes out of our elders who've lived a lot of life, and they don't need to use many words, but what they say has a depth and a gravity to it. He was very like that. But he was also irrepressibly playful, hilariously funny, quick-witted, always having a potent one-liner that made us laugh, while at the same time giving a teaching. It was pretty remarkable. The mantra that we sing, Om Namah Shivaya, I first learned that through Rabbi Gelberman because he'd poached it from Swami Satchidananda. The original is Om Namah Shivaya, but he taught it to me as Adonai li v'lo ira, which is Hebrew for part of Psalm 23. God is with me, I will not fear. And of Psalm 23, which is, I'm sure most of you know, speaks about, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me, I will not fear. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. It goes on. It is one of the most beautiful passages in the whole Bible, if you ask me. And Rabbi used to say, yes, we all have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death sometimes. No one gets to not have to do that. And the Buddha understood that too. But from Rabbi's perspective, he says, but you're supposed to walk through it. You're not supposed to get stuck there. And coming from him, that was a very profound thing to receive in the early days of my path. He told me even more that in that day in Oxford when we were sitting together, and I pressed him a little bit more, like, how do you deal with what must arrive as these waves of horrific thoughts and memories of what your people went through? He told me that whenever a wave of grief came, or whenever he felt the fire, the rage, really difficult feelings, that he would visualize his ancestors, his father, his grandfather, his family, singing and dancing as they're going into the gas chambers, as they're going to their horrific deaths. And he told me that in his lineage, which is Hasidic Judaism, very ecstatic form of Judaism, that praise is the central way to remember God, to remember that life is beautiful even in the worst situations, even in the face of heinous injustice and the worst that humanity is capable of. For Rabbi, this was very real. And even his answering machine message contained this. So in the days, back when we all had clunky answering machines attached to our landlines, I remember the first encounter I had with Rabbi was his answering machine message. And this is what it said. Shalom, my friends. This is the day the Lord has created for you to be joyful and content. Seize this day and live it well, and leave a message after the beat. Shalom, my friends. Shalom. I thought, who is this crazy guy? But as I got to know him, I understood why. In every class, it would begin with him saying, on your feet. He'd have us singing songs first up, right? Half of the class was just singing songs, right, with Rabbi. That always made me feel really embarrassed. I was in my 20s after all. And, I'm a waspy girl. So this was pretty unusual for me. And yet it was infectious. So the most often the beginning of class was he'd get us opening our arms, opening our whole bodies on our feet and singing, I am ready, I am ready, I am ready. And he'd build it up. I am ready. And he'd say, what are you ready for? And he'd get us singing, to do the good and the beautiful. I am ready, I am ready, I am ready. Stuff like that. He'd get us singing songs like, the whole wide world is waiting to sing this song of joy. The whole wide world is waiting to sing this song of joy. Like, it was profound. I'll never forget it. I'm so grateful for that foundational transmission about the power and the importance of living fully, of celebrating the gift of life, even when it's not going the way we want, when it's hard. This is potent medicine, especially amidst circumstances that can easily activate feelings of despair. Rabbi would remind us of a teaching from the Talmud that said, on the day of judgment, you will be called to account for all the good things that were offered that you refused to enjoy. And as you and I, as we together walk this way of grace, we need to stay awake to the fact that ego relaxation is going to mean not only letting ourselves be present with all of the feelings and the grief and so forth, but also to be awake to the tendency to let our troubles eclipse the fundamental beauty and goodness of life. Ego, as we've seen together, is always coming from duality. And one way that manifests is the tendency to think in terms of this or that, not both, right? A grief process, as we might know, can also coexist with moments of joy. And even when things may be going in the opposite direction to what we most hoped and wanted. As our late and dear friend Neil Rogan used to say often, God is still good. Life is still beautiful. And it's key to our spiritual maturity to stay open to this, to stay close to this. And let us never forget that the work in the second dimension of grace, which is grace in the form of its blessings, is fundamentally about receptivity. So receiving the blessings of grace is important because it helps us fill up from within and stay intimate with that truth, that every second of life is a gift. So although the collective situation, both politically, culturally, and environmentally, is weighing heavily on my heart, it may be on yours too. And I embrace the fact of that as a part of my heart's caring for others, caring for the planet, caring for our society. It's also true that my life is profoundly blessed and fortunate. Although I've had my fair share of difficult moments and traumas to have to deal with and work through, my life is not without its stress, right? At the same time, I feel profoundly fortunate. I wake up spontaneously in prayer, in gratitude. I give thanks for what is, for the day, for the blessing of my marriage, for the blessing of this Sangha, for the fact that this is what I get to do with my life. that you're here, that we're here together, that somehow that's happened. There's not a day that goes past where I don't give thanks for my marriage. And not just my husband, but the marriage that has formed into a palpable entity that is born of our shared commitment and love and embrace of our marriage as a practice of living into our vows that we co-created together many years ago out of a deep inquiry that we did together into what are we saying yes to? What is it really about? We boiled that deep inquiry into 8 lines that formed a prayer. And one of the vows in our marriage vow was a vow to unabashedly pleasure in our togetherness and celebrate with gratitude the sacred mystery of life. So oftentimes when we're just together and it's beautiful, right? Whether there's a beautiful moment we're having together on the ski slopes or gliding on crystal clear waters on our stand-up paddle boards or dancing to some fabulous music. One of us spontaneously recites that line of our marriage vows, bringing into the field of our togetherness, this is spiritual practice right now, this too, as well as staying present in the face of defenses and navigating, the tricky spots. It's all spiritual practice. And so these days, as together in our marriage, we are also journeying with how it is for us in this collective situation, how we feel about it, how we're navigating that. It's become a big part of the field of our journey together. At the same time, there is laughter, there is humor, there's comfort and goodness and deep appreciation for it all. Staying close to that in our own way is crucial for our ongoing spiritual practice and our being graceful here in the world. We all need goodness. We all need to enjoy good times, to find pleasure in life, because none of us are going to thrive when we feel bad for extended periods, when we're getting stuck in that valley of the shadow of death, right? So accessing joy is a crucial part of how we regenerate, we recirculate the nourishment, how we stay intimate to the goodness and the blessing of life. It's also a key aspect of how we deepen into what it is that we fundamentally are. The Vedic scriptures describe what we really are, right, as Sat, or being, Chit, which is consciousness, and Ananda, which is a synthesis of love, joy, and bliss. We are being, we are consciousness, we are bliss. That is our nature, underneath all the personality. So the Upanishads go even further with this, and they say, all things are born out of bliss. They live in bliss and dissolve into bliss. That may not be your everyday experience. That may not be very accessible to many people on the planet, but it is your birthright. It is where your ongoing spiritual practice can take you more and more. So, of course, the opposite of this that we see very Much in our world right now is depression. Even before the pandemic, the World Health Organization cited depression as the #1 health crisis in the developed world. And as I'm sure you can imagine now, these days, there's a global mental health crisis that's much worse. And many vectors that are contributing to this worsening. The pandemic didn't help. The social isolation didn't help. Right? The algorithms don't help. The social media doesn't help. The increased use of technology that can easily disconnect us doesn't help. The tendency to suppress our emotions, undigested trauma, doesn't help. When we don't have the support we need to process what we go through and digest it so we can move through that valley of the shadow of death, that doesn't help. Right? There are other things too. In my own experience, and I've had to journey with depression. In fact, it was in the crucible of depression that I first became kind of got onto the spiritual path. It happened within a depression experience. What I've seen is that there's a deep spiritual root. The real underlying driving cause of depression is disconnection from the ananda that is the depth of our own heart. So that's actually good news, because although ananda can be covered over, buried, it's not something that cannot be there ultimately. So although we may not be feeling much ananda right now because there are conditions that we haven't yet found the way to digest, or we haven't been able to come to adapt to, adapting to difficult conditions that we didn't want is always a process. And so we don't get to ananda by bypassing. We must honor our process. As many of you know, most of you were here then, a few years ago, I broke my leg. And at first, when something happens and it's big and it's intense and it's unexpected and unwanted, inevitably there's shock. There's a shock layer we have to go through. There's pain. We might go through anger. We will usually go through a period of depression. All of this is like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's arc that she described of what we go through in the process of coming to accept our circumstances and be resilient and find peace within them, find the way to navigate them gracefully. For me, in those early days of breaking my leg, where I couldn't do anything, really, I couldn't make my own food, I couldn't sit at my altar and meditate, I couldn't walk in nature, I couldn't drive myself, right? I became a disabled person overnight. I couldn't go out to live music. I had no independence. It was very hard to be with that, to be with this, knowing that I would have to accept this for quite some time. Of course, when the depression hit, it was really hard. I would lie in bed, and out of one window I would see my hiking trail. There was such a thing that sparked joy, my capacity to get out on that trail. Or I'd turn over bed in the other way, and there would be my meditation cushion and my altar waiting for me, and I physically couldn't get down onto it. Right? So I went through a depression, and I remember, my husband, my sister, family members, trying to cheer me up, and it made me really angry. It wasn't helpful. So I had to, really stake my claim and look, this is where I am right now. I don't need to be cheered up. I need to stay present and feel this and honor it for what it is, knowing that it is part of a natural process. But as I honored the phases and the stages of my process that included depression, right, something began to change. Somehow the capacity to accept my situation and be resilient and creative within it emerged. The depression passed and a sort of a joyful quality started to return. And I remember going online on Amazon and purchasing crutch accessories in hot pink and gold. And that gave me a little more independence. I could carry a water bottle. I could put my cell phone in there. And I realized, why can't I get on a plane and go to France and teach that retreat, which I did? There was just this sort of shift that happened, a creativity, a capacity that allowed me to move forward, both practically and inwardly. And it didn't come from trying not to have those feelings. It came through honoring it all. A playful spirit emerged, and I went out to live music anyway. I called venues ahead to get a disabled pass so I could sit down at some point, and I learned to dance on crutches. This spirit of Ananda arose, and I understood more deeply that since the joy, the source of the joy, is really the oceanic depth of our hearts. What it means is that it's possible for Ananda, love, joy, even bliss to be present when things are going well the way we want them to, and also when things feel like they're falling apart. And the ticket price is welcoming all parts of our experience, not this or that, all of it. So our practice that we have been working with throughout of ego relaxation, which invites us to be present, to open, soften, allow our experience, is always going to move us through our process with more grace. It's also going to give us more access to Ananda, because it's what's going to help us to stay in touch with our heart. And it's our deep heart that is the source of the Ananda. The greatest stumbling block, in addition to trying to bypass or just reach for a spiritual platitude, which is what I see a lot of people in the New Agey world doing right now, other blocks to the regenerative power of joy is, the fact that, given that our ego's tendency is always to be hovering on the surface of our personality, what that tendency lends itself to when it comes to joy and celebration is that we're often not understanding that the beautiful things in our life that might spark joy are really just the surface, the triggers. And so when we don't understand where those beautiful gifts are coming from, we can get caught in a trap of trying to get particular conditions, right? Trying to get more peak experiences, trying to get more success, trying to get more sexual satisfaction, more money, more sense pleasures, more fun moments. None of these things are inherently wrong. But if we are thinking that those are the things that are really going to do it for us, then we are chanting that Rolling Stones theme tune, I can't get no satisfaction, right? Of course, that became a worldwide hit because we all know how that is. We all know how that feels when nothing really satisfies, right? Hafiz says the mind, the ego mind really, is ever a tourist, wanting to touch and buy new things and then toss them into an already full closet, right? And so when we don't inhabit our experience deeply enough, when we're always looking to the outside, whatever beautiful moments or sweet pleasures we have, They don't penetrate deeply enough to content our soul. We're not practicing with them. We're not realizing the source of these blessings. We're not realizing, as Rabbi said, this is the way that the Lord has created for you. This is the immensity of the beneficence of reality, bringing its beauty to you personally. Right? So other things that can block the possibility of accessing the regenerative power of joy, the ananda of our deep heart, are beliefs that we might have or attachments we might have about what we think we have to get past. It's very easy to think, I must get past this health condition before joy is possible. Right? I don't like having a broken leg. This is making me miserable. It's not possible for me to have any joy or to be joyful with a broken leg and not being able to do anything. Because we know how that feels, but it's not the truth. Or we may tell ourselves, my kids must be doing well, otherwise I cannot be joyful. Or I must lose this weight or not have this health condition in my body before it's possible to be joyful. Or I cannot be joyful given what's coming down politically. What do you say? I must get or I must get past before you believe it's possible to be joyful. It's good to tell the truth and to confront those tendencies that we have that insist joy and even ananda is entirely circumstance dependent. But the nuance in all of this is that confronting those hidden pockets where we're attached, where we're locking down into a position, does not mean that we don't address important situations in our lives. It doesn't mean that we don't address important issues in our personal life, in our marriage, in our interpersonal relationships. And it doesn't mean that we don't continue to explore what feels like right action for us in our collective situation. It is still possible to work on your health, on your finances, on your relationships, on your personal process. And it's still possible to be active politically, stand up for what you believe in society, not be passive or resigned, but reflect deeply. Okay, what can I do in the face of what concerns you? While not using these situations to reify a belief that joy isn't possible unless life is going the way you want. Life will not always go the way you want it to. So how can we reclaim the restorative power of joy in the face of whatever is here? One simple thing that probably hasn't occurred to you, because it often doesn't occur, is that we can practice ego relaxation with the ordinary triggers for joy, for pleasure, in those moments where we're feeling a warm glow of well-being, anything that just activates a felt sense of life is good, life is a blessing, right? So we're used to thinking of the word trigger only in terms of our shadow, but we can harness, that same mechanism to practice in moments like eating food you really like. Like one of the things that activates my joy is when I'm not working on a Sunday and I can go down to the farmer's market and I can buy what is peaking in that season, and I can bite down to a juicy peach or a crisp, sweet, tart apple, and really deeply sense how that is in my mouth. Like we might relish and savor a little cube of chocolate upon our tongue and feel that unctuous, oozy melting in the way that it ignites that dopamine release in our brain and the wave of delicious yumminess that moves through our body. How we may put our nose into a jasmine or a rose bush, or even run our hand off a rosemary bush and inhale the amazing scent. How it might be when we just behold a child's laughter, or the sweet purr of your pussycat that rests, curls up on your lap, or watching dogs play on a beach with other dogs. Or one of my favorites is watching silly cat videos on YouTube. Or going to an art gallery and just letting yourself be visually inspired. Or taking yourself to music, or going somewhere different than you normally would on, some music platform, and opening up to the art and the amazing music, the Shakti of music. Going out on your deck and just being present for the sunrise or the sunset. Singing or listening to a mantra and feeling the pulsation of the mantra and sensing the transmission of the mantra. Cooking a meal, hanging out with friends, sensing into your body as you're sitting there at the dinner table with those friends, whatever the conversation is, and letting yourself just really feel the nourishment of the connection that's here. There's so many ordinary, everyday things that can trigger the possibility for joy and ananda, right? But while many things can trigger that experience of ananda, the love, the joy, the bliss, right? When you really go deep into those moments and you inquire, what is the location? Where is this ananda arising out of in my experience? Where is it coming from? We see that while ordinary things may trigger the heart's ananda, the location of the ananda is our own heart. And so the practice is staying deeply present and inhabiting the experience of these sweet moments that we know are regenerative and very important, especially now. And then turn the energy deeper inwards and let the trigger draw you back into the actual source of the ananda, which is the fountainous quality of your own heart. And this is how the ordinary experience of joyful moments and even sense pleasures get liberated from its conditions, and how we begin to reclaim the regenerative joy of our being that becomes less and less dependent on outside things. And the more you abide in that depth of your heart, the more deeply you sense and feel and practice when you become more awake to the sweet moments and the beauty and the fact of blessing, the more what grows in you is a contentment that needs less stimuli, the more you grow resilient, because you can stay intimate with the fact that even when things are not what you want, even when things seem like they're going wrong and are concerning to you, that you may or may not want to explore how to participate, how to address. Nevertheless, you can still stay in touch with something that is deeper and more primordial, that is part of us all. And this helps you become more capable of navigating difficulties with equanimity, retaining your joyful spirit, staying optimistic even in the face of tough things. And this, my friends, gives us a profound and powerful platform to be able to respond, show up, contribute. And in the process, our being deepens and radiates its goodness to others. One of Ramana Maharshi's most devoted students and a profound Vedic scholar himself, whose name was Murugana, he commentated on something Ramana said by this: to whatever extent you dive within the heart, to that same extent will you experience the bliss which emerges from within you as an undivided spirit that shines with an utterly different nature to sense enjoyments. So sense enjoyments can be the trigger for something even deeper, even more regenerative, that has great power to it, that human beings like Rabbi Gelberman and many others who went through very difficult things were able to live through and by and demonstrate to us, reminding us that other humans have been through very big things too, in their collective as well as personal experience, and that it's possible to live meaningfully and well, even as we grapple with big things. So today, my friends, I've created an inquiry process with a meditation in the middle that intentionally invites us to firstly give space to wherever we are, however we feel, the things that may be weighing heavily on our heart. And of course, that can be anything for you. It can be personal, it can be interpersonal, it can be things in our collective. I don't want or encourage bypassing, right? But I want to give everyone, give all of us just a space to name what that might be. And if in this inquiry there isn't anything weighing heavily on your heart, then that's okay too. Just speak to what is in your heart, what you are experiencing in the terrain of your heart, right? So we're going to start there. We're going to start with this question. Tell me something that is weighing heavily on your heart. Right? So just name whatever that is, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're with, whatever is concerning to you. Right? It's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad. This is just space to let that be heard, knowing that the only thing we say to one another is thank you. We acknowledge it. We allow space for this. It is welcome. You are welcome. Then Jenny will bring us back into the main room. I'll take you into a meditation. And we're going to go further after having allowed space and welcome for what is weighing heavily on our heart. We're going to go deeper into the heart. And then I'm going to share with you an invitation from the Radiant Sutras, from an ancient Kashmiri Shaivite text that invites us to go into Ananda, and then we're going to go into a three-part looping. It starts this way. Tell me something that triggers your heart to soar in joy. So in my talk today, I've named a few things that do it for me. Well, let's see what that is for you. Name something, and then the next question invites you to practice with it. What's it like in body, heart, mind if you turn the energy inwards and follow this trigger to its source? Right? So we're naming that trigger, and then we're turning the energy in, following the trigger to its source, and seeing what that's like viscerally in our body, what that's like in our heart, what that brings forth in terms of our awareness. And the third question is simply what's coming alive in your direct experience now. So then we will loop with those three questions, and at this point you all know how to do that. Follow the rise and fall of your breath. The welcoming in breath. The melting out breath. As you just be here where you are. Whatever has come forth from that inquiry. Opening, softening, allowing your experience as it is now. The sensations in your body. Your inner atmosphere. Feelings, emotions. Whatever you have seen. Right now, there's nothing you have to do about that. Having allowed space to name it and feel it and see what it is that weighs heavily on your heart. See if you can relax the focus on that weight, on those things. In the same way that you would put down a heavy bag of groceries because you've arrived in your kitchen. See if you can put down those concerns. Bringing your attention to your heart being breathed. As if each in-breath allows more space in the heart. space for all things to coexist. What if your concerns can coexist within a grace that's always here, deep within you? Deep within your heart. Receive these words, this transmission from the Radiant Sutras. The roar of joy that set the world in motion is reverberating in your body and in the space between all bodies. Beloved, listen, sense, feel. Find that exuberant vibration humming within you. Resounding through the channels of delight. You are flooded by bliss always. Float with the sound. Melt with it into divine silence. The sacred power of space will carry you into the dancing, radiant emptiness that is the source of all. The ocean of Ananda is inviting you into its exquisite embrace. Calling you home. So inwardly, let us transition into the inquiry. Letting the eyes softly open. And when we're ready, letting the inquiry questions take us where they will. Tell me something that triggers your heart to soar in joy. What's it like, body, heart, mind, if you turn inward, following this trigger to its source? What's coming alive?